And okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to this wonderful conversation. It's a privilege to be here. My name is Uri Schneider. I lead at Schneider Speech, and it's a big, big privilege to host Kristin Chmela from Chmela Fluency. I'll do an intro, but the most important thing is she taught me a vocabulary word that I love to use all the time. It's called heuristics. It's the study of problem solving. And there was an epic pre-conference at ASHA in Miami almost 20 years ago. And nothing's been the same for me ever since that presentation. There was another presenter there, also very influential. But Kristin's talk on heuristics is really, if anyone knows me, you know, the workshops I give and talking about problem solving as professionals and the work we do with individuals, figuring out how to problem solve. Even my kids make fun of me. They know that the skill that I believe is the most important skill isn't arithmetic or spelling, but problem solving. Mm-hmm. And if we can figure out how to acknowledge what is and find our way through it, and use different approaches that work for different people, different times of life. Some of us are inclined to solve problems one way, others the other way, but that work and that presentation was a PowerPoint that's forever, you know, kind of imprinted into my being. So big thank you to Kristin for that. Mm-hmm. And I'll do the formal intro, so to speak, just to let you know who you're in the presence of in case you don't know. Kristin Chmela spends most of her time working with people of all ages, people who stutter at the Chmela Fluency Center in suburban Chicago, in Illinois. She's lectured on the topic of children stuttering around the world. She's the co-founder, co-director of Camp Shoutout, a therapeutic program for school-age kids who stutter, and a hands-on training opportunity for professionals and graduate students. She's the former chair of the American Board of Fluency and Fluency Disorders. She supervises graduate students from around the globe. She provides professional apprenticeship at her center. She's collaborated extensively with the incredible Stuttering Foundation and Jane Fraser on training videos and conferences and publications. And she's the lead author of Basic Principle Problem Solving, working with school-age children who stutter. To round it out, she's also a certified yoga instructor, a teacher of mindfulness, and this is the kicker. This is the line that she really stands on. She believes that all can choose to continue evolving as communicators. Mm-hmm. Kristin, welcome. What do you want? What would you want people to know about you? What are you most proud of?
Thank you for having me. It's so wonderful to be with you and to talk with you this morning. What am I most proud of? I think I'm most proud of my wonderful children. I have 2 grown daughters and my grandson. I think that's what I'm most proud of.
How old is your grandson?
He is about 17 months. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what's the experience of grandmothering compared to being a mom? And the piece that I didn't include is that you also know stuttering from the inside. And we've touched on that in some of the other conversations. People who stutter, whether they became speech therapists or went on in other paths, being a parent and bringing a child into the world and raising a child is always a very intense experience. And then there are those that have the privilege to know what it is to be a grandparent. Mm-hmm. What can you share about the difference of your journey in parenting and grandparenting?
Well, I think when you're the grandparent, you can observe and then you can go home and get a good night's sleep, right?
That's right. Hand off.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I, both have great joys, but there's nothing quite like being a grandparent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So you gave me a couple things that were valuable points that we'll hopefully get to. One of the things that I wanted to have some insight, and I have a little bit, but I would love to hear more. Here you are today, and it's so easy to see the final product of years of the journey of living. What was Kristen like growing up? You know, maybe just touch points in those early years, school age years, high school. And then of course, I think at age 19, you had some really pivotal encounters. Maybe just bring us through a little bit of that.
Kristen growing up was very different on the outside than on the inside. So I could say that I appeared to be very social and have lots of friends. I was very creative. I was a dancer and enjoyed that tremendously. But on the inside, I think I suffered from depression often. I was bullied quite a bit when I was in grammar school, and it certainly had a lasting impact on me. I wanted always to be a part of the group, but never quite knew exactly how. So there was a lot of, I think, deep loneliness, and I was quiet. I learned pretty early on that for whatever messages I was getting, and at the time I think this was so normal, that you're really not supposed to talk like that. If you stutter, that's not the way we do it. And I was so sensitive as a child that I really stopped talking. I talked only if I thought I could get the words out. And I had severe anxiety as a child growing up, anxiety around perhaps communication, and I was afraid of dogs, I was afraid of heights. So it really went beyond just the scope of the stuttering experience, right? So the other thing I was going to tell you when you asked the question, what are you most proud of? The other thing that I'm most proud of is how far I have come as a human being.
Tell us more about that.
I'll share an experience that I had at Camp Shoutout a couple of years ago. I promised some campers I would go down the zip line. And being afraid of heights, this was something that feel very traumatic for me. I had an experience when I was a child, and I slipped. I didn't fall far, but I just slipped on an escalator coming back from Polly's Island holding some shells and a suitcase. I was maybe 10 or 11. And that made such an imprint on my brain. I have one of these sensitive brains that holds on to those experiences so intently. And after that, I remember going to the shopping mall with my mother, and I would make her walk with me all the way to the other end to take the stairs, because that feeling of getting on that escalator was so terrifying. And yet at the same time, I kept pushing myself, and I was in ski school. So we were at Camp Shoutout, and I made this promise. And one of the campers said, "Miss Kristen, that took you 7 years." So it was one of those times where I thought, I have to go up. I knew I had to go up. I really wanted to leave the camp and go pretend like I had something to do, which I could have done.
How old were you at that point?
At this point, let's say that maybe.
Well, yeah, you weren't 15 anymore.
No, I wasn't 15. And
so the procrastination station and the ability to duck and dodge and those stories and those strategies and coping mechanisms were alive and well, even as you're an adult facilitating a camp to help young people kind of
course, and
come out. I think that's so profound.
That's part of what we do at camp, is we talk about how we're still evolving. So I'll go back to the story. So I got the helmet on and I went up, and as I climbed about 60 feet of the spiral staircase, I was just sobbing. And I got to the top, and the counselor at the top said, "Are you sure you want to do this? It's okay if you go down." oh no, I mean, it's okay if you go down the stairs. I said, I'm not going down those stairs. There's no way I'm not going to do this. It took about 10 minutes. And there were all the campers below, and they saw me and how upset I was. And I jumped. And the reason this relates to how things have evolved, I guess, is the next year I went back to camp, and I had been intensively in my yoga mindfulness training, which was about 200 hours. And I put that helmet on and I walked up those stairs and I went like this and I just walked off. And that was probably the peak of, wow, we really can change our brain. We really can go to our breath and really know who we are. And I just jumped. And the camper said, was it more fun this time? And I said, no. And I don't know if I'll do it again. But that was a big moment. That was a big
So powerful. We were sitting this past Friday night at our family dinner table, and it was the beginning of the Jewish New Year. So we were reflecting on plenty of stress over the past year, that's for sure. But we were trying to remember the highlights, both within these stressful months, and also the fact that there were parts of this, at least from the Jewish New Year, but even since January of 2020, there were times where we weren't living with this or even remembering previous years. So we went through and we replayed the year. And one of those replays, which the kids couldn't believe was this year, was a zip line. And I have twin girls. They're 9 years old. They really wanted to go. There's no way my wife or I would go in there. And my older son gets on and they tie the three of them together. So it's a 3-person zip line, safe. They're strapped on. We triple check that everything is clamped. They're wearing all the get up. And very long zip line and very big valley in the middle. Mm-hmm. And as they go across, we see that they're kind of slowing down before they get to the other end. And they slow down and they just didn't make it to the other end. And so they start drifting back to the middle where they sat hanging over this valley. Mm. Now, what was striking was that my other son, who's a little bit of a photographer, videographer, he's getting this all on tape. And when we watch the tape later, my wife and I are losing it in different ways. We're both responding to this with great concern, but expressing it so differently. But when you watch the tape of the video, the three of them are laughing. Mm-hmm. It was the highlight for them. They had seen some other people get stuck apparently, and thought it would be so cool because it's an expensive ride. Mm-hmm. Why not drag it out? So by getting stuck, they actually got a lot more bang for the buck. So just, I think what that speaks to me is the different ways different people experience things, and parents and children going through experiences. And certainly we working with people who are caring for young people who stutter, let's say, or going through any kind of challenge. You know, all the feelings are legitimate, but the important thing is to really check in and see what each person's going through. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece that just comes out that I want to highlight from your story is ongoing evolution. And I think you know, in our preparing, you highlighted that so many times, but whether it's as a communicator, mm-hmm. whether it's stretching boundaries in other places, becoming bigger and going further, the mind over body, realizing we're bigger than, you know, just the habits and loops that we went through yesterday. And it takes time. You know, it took you a couple of years, even though you had that commitment. So everybody in the right time and everybody in the right way. And the other big line of yours, there's no one way. There's no one way and there's no right time. It's about, you know, moving through that. So what would you say about that in terms of insights that you would wish to share with people going through it or professionals about there's no one way, but how do you find your way, or how do you find the right way for that person? What would you offer?
I think what I would say is, like, as I look back on my own story and think about different experiences I had, that first of all, there's so much choice involved. So there's the choice to start paying attention to where you are and what's happening and who's around you to support you. And then there's the next choice, which is to move forward. And I always like to say to be present to where you are now and do the next thing. Do the next thing. And I remember being a freshman in college in an English class, and it reminded me of the bigness of this going down the zip line. And of course, going down the zip line was a different thing. And that was what was important, was for me to be vulnerable in front of these campers and say, we all have fears and we all work to know ourselves better and to overcome and to move on. And I had to we had to say our name in the class, and I just got up and left, and I drove all the way home. It was a community college class. And I left my purse there, and I had to drive all the way back. It was about an hour away, and explain to the teacher why I left, because I stuttered and I couldn't say my name. And then we had to give a speech in the class for the whole grade. And at some point, I sat there during the whole class and never contributed, never raised my hand. She told me I could write a paper instead of doing the speech. And I had just started therapy with the Gregorys. And at some point, I made the choice that the only way was forward. And my mother said I was always a survivor. Even as a child, I would just keep going. So maybe that was persistence as part of my temperament. But I made that choice. And I'm very interested in neuroscience and what they're teaching us now about the brain and about our ability to keep evolving. And I love when they talk about how it takes the brain 30 seconds longer to come up with what is going well, because we are wired to attach to what is not going well for survival. Right. That's that primitive reptilian brain. And when I made the choice in my life to start looking at what is going well and what can I do next and how can I challenge myself, that's how I stayed on the road, I guess, so to speak. I'm still on the road of the journey, but that's certainly how I got on. And your father was a pivotal person for me in my own journey. We would talk. I would see him at Asha, and we would have talks. We never talked really about frivolous things. We talked.
No, my dad doesn't do the frivolous thing.
No, talk. I don't much do it either. We talked about the real things.
Essence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he's been a mentor and a guide in so many ways. Mm-hmm.
Well, we might have a surprise visit. We'll see about that. He was very excited to tune into this and maybe join us. I think that right there is a really interesting thing, because the video clip that I shared, which you were so taken by, and my dad didn't know I still had that. It was from 2008, something we prepared for Asha with you and with David Shapiro, both at that point very accomplished. And of course, when I asked you of the most proud thing or accomplishment, you didn't list all the credentials after your name or the long paragraph I can list of all those things and all those doings. It's the being a grandparent is the most satisfying. But it's interesting, it's interesting to think about, and if you could share, because this was something people asked me to ask you about. You know, there you are speaking at the conferences. You're a leader in the profession. Mm-hmm. And then you're having these conversations with my dad, some of them on videotape. Those are the only ones that I know because they were kind of documented, talking about still, as you said, being on the road of grappling with the stutter, even as you are accomplished and respected and decorated and brought on to the stage to really be a leader and influencer. The dichotomy of the outside, the inside, of being that far along, of what might be thought of as acceptance, being cured. I think if you could shed some light on the nuance of adults who get past stuttering, you know, whether it's with Joe Biden, whether it's with others, all these people that show up on the poster of the Stuttering Foundation versus those that stutter openly. There's there's a lot of interest now about this in terms of what does that mean, and how would you unpack that and share with that what it means to get over it, to get past it, to be cured even when it's still present? What can you share on that?
This is a really important topic, because I do feel that so many speech pathologists will hear something and then try to apply it without the depth of knowledge that is needed to move, let's say, a child, a family, an adult along in this process.
Right.
And I think at different times in life, we perceive things in the present, and then as we continue on the journey, we alter those perceptions. I remember being a very young clinician saying out loud, I was probably in my early 20s, saying, I've gone through the process of this problem. I've accepted this, I've accepted the stuttering, and I've gotten through it. And then I had children, and all of a sudden, I was in situations where there were people I didn't know, and I had to introduce myself. And I clearly remember dropping my daughter off at preschool and meeting a mother and having a big block on my name and getting in the car and thinking she may not want her daughter to play with my daughter because she may think there's something really wrong with me. And when I said that out loud, I went, wow, what am I not seeing here? And I was still working on my speech. I wanted to be able to speak. I wanted to be able to speak. And the Gregorys told me I could want that. They never told me I couldn't want that. So I wanted that. Did I put the work in? You bet. I would go into the bathroom. I would rehearse. I would write things out. I would practice phrasing. That was a different way of communicating. I feel like now I just talk, right? But at that point, when I realized, when I said that out loud, and then I realized I was to give a maid of honor speech at a friend's wedding, and I felt and I would embarrass her if I got up and stuttered. When I said that out loud, I realized I had not dealt with those deep feelings of shame and embarrassment and humiliation and trauma. And I had a relapse with my stuttering. It was such a blessing. And I started to really do the hard work. And that's hard work. And if you're willing to get in the tunnel and stay and work it through. And I had a therapist help me, not a speech therapist. This was other counseling, CBT and different other counseling. If you're willing to stay in the tunnel, there is only one way out, and it's the other side. But it's a very uncomfortable place to be because it's very emotional. And I just kept doing the next thing. Mm-hmm.
I think the other important caveat there for anyone listening, such vulnerability and honesty, but you're the only person that can put yourself in that tunnel. No one else has the right to put you in that place. I think sometimes parents or others, people that love you with the best intentions, would want to push someone forward. And similarly on the platform, to go over the edge to do the jump. Nobody should be pushed. You know, you've got to jump yourself. But when the person makes that choice, whatever stage they're up to, whatever age they are. So what would you say? Would you say that you still stutter? You identify as being a person who stutters today?
You know, I could stutter. I could definitely stutter at a given moment. And if I do, I say, oh, that was real. Did you see? I just stuttered. Do I think about my speech? Not particularly. Do I identify in the mind of a person who stutters? Probably not.
You know, Michael Lieben. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel a little caught because that was my whole existence. And then of course, as talking gets easier, there are many in the stuttering community that want you to stutter. If
Right.
you're going to, let's say, give a presentation.
Right.
I remember a very, very special person that gave a keynote talk at a conference.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to me and he said, they want me to stutter. They want me to make sure that I stutter. And I looked at this individual and I said, may I give you a piece of advice? Why don't you just talk?
Yeah.
And whatever that means, however that is, just talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I could still stutter, definitely. I'm wired that way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Michael Lieben has this beautiful idea. I've shared it with many people that we meet. You know, he says it used to be that stuttering was the primary theme. It was in the foreground of every decision to choose to do, not to do, to say that word, to not say that word. The overtone of every experience was colored and shaded by this primary identity and feeling and fear and concern about the physical getting stuck, and also the stories, the feelings, the thoughts running through the head. He said, now it's just one of 1,000 things that make me who I am. And so he would never say he doesn't stutter, but it's just that it's not the primary theme. It's no longer in such a prominent position. I find that that's a nice subtlety to it.
I feel like that's a really good way to say that. Mm-hmm.
Like a diamond. A diamond comes out of the mine very rough and dirty. It needs to be, the schmutz has to come off. And then you need a diamond cutter. And when you look at, you know, a diamond, if anyone's looking to get engaged, any guys out there, you learn about the 3 C's, you know, the color, the clarity, and the cut. The diamond cutter doesn't make it a better stone. He just knows how to add more facets. And when you add dimensions and facets, so then no one side is more prominent than the other. So I think the idea of taking a die, you know, you look at a die, is it a 1 or is it a 6? Then, turn it around, it's both. And so the stutter doesn't have to be the only identity, and it also doesn't have to disappear, but you can choose to put other things, you know, more front and center. But certainly the issue of identity and a sensitivity around it is one that's an important conversation that's happening on so many levels today. So
and
just wanted to touch on that.
And I remember even having a client, I can see it, like I can remember everything about it as I'm in my basement in my office. When my kids were growing up, I worked out of the house, and he was 13 and he looked straight at me and he said, Miss Kristen, did you just avoid a word? And I said, yes. And I really had to realize that I was still afraid. I had not worked through those emotions. We joined a new church, and when I had to explain the directions from our house to get to the church as a way to get to know people, I got up and left and went into the bathroom. And I thought, I feel like I'm 10. And I was upset, and I went back to that.
You weren't 10 anymore.
No. And I went back to that group and said, this is what's happening. And I'm okay. And I stutter sometimes. And I had a lot of those experiences. My first ASHA presentation, I decided I'm not going to try to work on my fluency. I'm just going to talk. And I stuttered my way through the whole thing. And I sat down and I said, okay, I'm alive. You know, I'm still here. I think I made a contribution. Is it possible that you can really accept that this can happen and you can still work on it at the same time? That's what Hugo Gregory was all about. There are 2 sides to every coin. There's lots of ways to modify, and there's ways of dealing with these attitudes and feelings. And when I say I'm still evolving, I may have become a really easy, relaxed communicator, but I'm still evolving and working on things like holding back, not interrupting. I'm not a very good listener all the time. I may be in a work setting, but in my life, it's very hard for me. I get so excited. And I think part of it is that I spent so long not sharing that I just want to share and talk. And I'm still working on that. I think I'll always be working on that.
That's a great segue to some things I would love for you to share a little bit more about is the interplay between change in behavior and attitudes and beliefs, as well as Camp Shout Out and the important work and the importance now, and how Camp Shout Out is evolving into the times that we're living through. What could you share on that? Because I think what you're talking about is, even in this question about, do you still stutter? Do I occasionally get stuck? I heard you say, yeah, that could happen. Is it still my primary identity? And do I identify with the identity of Kristen, the person who stutters? You said probably not as much, but it's still there. And there's a certain contradiction there that is okay. But I think what you've talked about, and even in your career, adding mindfulness and therapy outside the scope of speech therapy, really speaks to, again, multiple facets. Can you share a little bit more about your beliefs and attitudes on that?
Well, I'll speak to the first point, which was something that Dr. Gregory always talked about, in that we work on modifying behaviors. And I'm not talking about fluency. I'm talking about even things like holding on to someone's face when you're stuttering, or using a stronger handshake when we get back to handshakes, or talking in complete sentences. There's so many ways we can modify behavior. And as we do that, our emotions begin to change. We may have some positive feelings about what we're capable of, and our perceptions may change. And as our perceptions change about ourselves, our beliefs, our behavior changes. So all of these things are intertwined, which I think is very important for parents to remember and for speech pathologists to remember. It's not just one thing. It's multiple things that we're doing that all interact with each other. And at the end of the day, can the person feel like they've been seen? Can the person feel like that person that's helping me, or that parent, they get it? And it's not always pleasant. So can we hold space for the child then, or for the adult? Just hold space for them, because that's part of being present, is acknowledging the unpleasant and the pleasant and the neutral, instead of trying to make it somehow better.
Nugget of wisdom on that for parents, how to do that. I mean, so much easier said than done. And as a father myself, I grapple with that and go through it with people all the time. The principle of being present and hanging in there, even in the difficult moments, is one that we can all agree on up here.
Yes.
And then there's a part of us that struggles in that moment. So as a parent, as a mother or a father is feeling the knife in the heart as the child is grappling to get their words out and really maybe going through a really intense block, what would be one nugget you could share with that parent to be present?
I think the nugget I would share is that nobody's taught how to do this. These are skills you can learn. For myself, reading Faber and Maslish's book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and listen so kids will talk.
I'm surprised they have any left in stock for the number that I've bought and given out.
Yes, instrumental in learning. These are skills. And then I wrote them down, and then I started practicing them. And then they became part of my clinical work. These are all skills, and none of us are perfect as parents. We keep evolving these skills, but to commit as a parent to learning how to be big enough for my child to allow that suffering, because if we allow it, we also model that we're going to come through it. And this is a big part of mindfulness. We learn to watch our thoughts come and go, and our emotions come and go. None of them last forever. I spent the first probably 4 months when I began doing restorative yoga, which in part is very meditative, crying on the mat. And my teacher, my guru, never asked me once to explain it. Never. We talk a lot in yoga about don't get caught in the chitti vritti. Don't get caught in the story of it, all the story. I guess you'd say minutia, right? All that stuff.
What was that word? Was it
Did
a real
you say
word?
Minutia? No, minutia, is that a word? My client said don't get caught in the
minutia is a great word. You taught me heuristic, so I'll validate minutia.
Okay. And that she just was there. And she said it was okay. And that was a big part for me of also recovering from those emotions. Yeah. The one thing that concerns me is the interpretation of the neurodiversity movement. And I'm not going to say that I'm even that knowledgeable about what that means, but this idea that do we have to fix our children? Should we do all these things, or should we just let them be who they are? And I don't really know how that ever got into the conversation. What we realize is, well, what I mean is that there's so many ways we can help children. We know that the brains of children who stutter are different than the brains of adults. And this brings me to Camp Shout Out and the idea that if we can cultivate places where children can have positive experiences communicating, that doesn't mean they may not be stuttering, but they're up there. They're up in front of 100 people and they're sharing, or maybe they are working on something and that's going into their brain. I think in the end, this is going to make a difference.
What does that mean? I want to highlight or hit on the head your point. What is it that bothers you or that you feel is important to emphasize about? Because the conversation about neurodiversity, just to lay it out there, is there's a thought that if this is the way the child is, it would be a mistake to try to shift or change or influence them to go any other way. That the way they are should be embraced fully as is, without mucking with it.
Right. And I've always believed that about children who stutter. They are okay because that's how they were born. People who stutter are always okay. And the idea that I don't want to have to fix, there's nothing to fix. We come and get help to evolve, to create a mindset that will help us throughout our life be able to feel that sense of peace about who we are and to be able to be in the world and navigate it in an easier way. And I think with children.
Yeah, talk about young children, and how would Kristen answer the question that we both get all the time from parents? You know, I wanna make sure that I do everything I can to help my child and spare them unpleasant experiences of bullying and teasing and low self-image. And at the same time, I don't want to do something that's going to intervene and mess with their path and their way and just accepting and loving them just for who they are. But I also want to help them. I think that's the tension. And how would you frame that? And I think it speaks to the work with young kids.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I would say, and I'm talking about children now that have persisted in stuttering, okay? So the early
treatment. Like what age are you?
I'm talking about children that may be 8 or 9 or 10 and have been stuttering for several years. Again, we can't put it all in a bucket, right? Every client is so different. But I would talk with the parent about how it's so normal to feel that we want to spare our child unpleasantness. And we also know that suffering is a part of the human condition. And there are ways that we can approach that. And I would want to know if the parent wants to help their child, if things were easier for the child, what would it look like? Well, I want my child to be able to tell us what happened at school during dinner and be able to get those words out easier instead of getting frustrated and leaving the table and saying, never mind. And what I would say is, okay, well, let's work with that.
You see who's in the waiting room? We have a surprise guest. Here he comes, Dr. Phil,
This
my
makes
father.
me so happy.
Here we go.
That's what happened at school during dinner, and be able
we got to turn off the Facebook
there. Out easier instead of getting frustrated and leaving the table and saying, never mind.
I just muted you, Abba, until you turn off the Facebook video. Just give me the thumbs up when you're ready. Yeah, Kristen, if you want to finish that, or maybe we'll just wait. This is a moment.
Sure.
Great. No, I know my father was tuned in and watching it live. And okay, Abba, welcome.
I don't want to speak. I just want to keep listening. This was a full meal. I feel you're such a gift. And I needed, I didn't even know I personally needed to hear you right now. I was actually thinking of who to call for help with some struggles emotionally. And I feel that being in your presence was so therapeutic, so healing for me. And I hope I can hold on to every single word and every single thought. And I don't just hear your words, but your way of expressing yourself is so profound, just reaches so deeply. Thank you so much. I'm glad to see you. And
Namaste. I'm so happy to see you too. It means so much.
It's totally mutual. It goes both ways. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to interrupt. I'm just drinking it in.
No, perfect timing. We were just talking about, reflected, I think you heard earlier, some of the conversations in your relationship kind of over the years, you guys. And we were just talking about young children, or I think it's important for all of us, and it relates to what Kristen was saying. We have to be very thoughtful about how we talk about certain words. Like when I say young children, and you say young children, and you say young children, we have very different ideas of what that means. So all the more so, the more abstract it gets. But Kristen was talking about the children in that 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and just
on up.
On up. And what about the younger ones too? I mean, maybe Kristen, you could relate to that, and maybe Ava, you could chime in.
Well, I want to say that I feel great concern when I read different things on social media that downplay the importance of early stuttering treatment. And again, I don't think any child ever has to be fixed. I think in the early developmental period of the brain of a child, we have a great chance of helping development ease when it comes to communication. And I am going to do everything I can to provide that opportunity for any child. And for some children, they may continue stuttering, and for some children, they won't continue. But this idea that people have to be fixed it almost stuns me to hear that. Of course, no, a child doesn't need to be fixed.
I think it's so important to just shift the frame from such a binary, either there's fixing or there's leaving it alone. There's such nuance and subtlety in so many ways to create an acceptance for the person just as they are, and at the same time opportunities for growth and evolution and development. So I think as you said, Kristen, it is concerning when the conversation becomes too polarized and too binary.
I think sometimes when, we only can see what we know, right? So when we have limited experience with the depth of these types of treatments and the manner in which we problem solve around each case, we might look at it very simply. A speech pathologist may say to a parent, well, we're working on acceptance and the child is 4. And so there's so much we need to know. You know, any problem is complex, right? And with any problem, I go back to these basic principles. The more we ask ourselves about what it is we're trying to figure out, the more we're able to meet the needs of the family.
I'll just make one more shout out to Jane Fraser. Besides that pre-conference in Miami, listening to Kristen talking about problem solving and how much that influenced me, the second most influential experience, more than graduate school, and I got a lot from some really great mentors, was the Stuttering Foundation workshop with Willie Butterall and Francis Cook, and learning about how they look at assessment. And every time we meet a young child, we take out that child summary chart, and speaking to your point, Kristen, figuring out what's developmentally appropriate, but also looking at things beyond the stuttering. What's the constitution of the child from a sensory point of view, from an emotional point of view, from a language communication spirit point of view, you know, looking at all those things, and those things help us figure out and problem solve. But you got to collect the dots. You got to collect all the pieces. But what are your thoughts on the working with young children who stutter? Yes.
I think that as I'm listening to you and soaking it in, and also reflecting on my own journey with trying to be supportive to people, the word fixing implies something's broken. The word supporting might be a better word, that rather than we have to either ignore this and not have any kind of support or get rid of it. And that's the binary contrast. This is a challenge for most people who have this trait. And they need support. And there's different ways to support people. And support is love and acceptance. It's making sure the right values about life and communicating remain on the forefront. It's about dealing with the values and the issues of feeling different and recognizing the fact that we all feel in a way like we want to be like the others. The reality of the world is everybody's different and everybody's got something they're hiding. So putting those feelings into a context which really normalizes the feeling of being abnormal. So I think that when you say, as I was trying to catch what you were sharing about that I don't go on those internet conversations. They wind up looking very, very simplistic and very binary. I think the reality is when you meet a person, you meet parents, you meet a child, it's very personal. And you become attached to those parents and to that child and devoted to trying to help the parents and the child navigate this thing which occurred in their lives. Nobody expected it. Very few human beings really think about this stuff when they're expecting a new child coming into their lives. Right. And helping them be able to sort out the feelings and the ideas and how to deal with it, and realistic expectations, and build up self-esteem. And I think there was a phrase I heard from you that I often try to hold on to, but I'm not sure I've got it right, but the image of it I use all the time. And so the words I have left in my head are a communicative spirit, the drive and the passion to make sure that you express what you're here in this world to express. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward. Sometimes it's not awkward, but the value of that and helping children strengthen that inner drive to be sure that they know that what they have to say counts. And I always felt when I was listening to this, one of the things that you somehow comes out of you from sharing your own story. And it's familiar to me, even though I don't stutter, because I understand anxiety and fearfulness, to run away and duck and so forth, versus to confront. And in the end, you always feel better when you go back in and you say, this is what's happening. And somehow once you go back and you face it and you verbalize it, you're able to start to move toward change. And I've always felt that from you. So I think that the job of the parents to make sure that they value what children have to say, whether it's bumpy or choppy or not. That, wow, great question. Unbelievable joke. You know how to make the world laugh and smile. What a gift that is. the greatest people in the world ask great questions. That's how the world evolves. You ask the greatest questions. You're angry and you're sharing it with us. I'm so happy that you can share your feelings, even if they're angry. It's important that you share feelings. That's how great relationships evolve. So I think that for parents to be able to meet you and hear about these kinds of ideas on a very soulful level, and to realize that everybody goes through these things. This is just the package that this issue is coming up for this child. So I just am happy you're in the world and keep doing this for people. Because you're right. I think that parents need that kind of support, and children need that kind of support. And you do it in many, many ways, and you encourage the rest of us in this trade, in this industry, to do the same thing, that it's about support. We don't know the end goal. We don't know. We don't have a photograph of what someone's going to look 20 years from now. We know where they're at now. We know anything is possible. And if we can see light in that image, that something great can evolve. And certainly your life is a testament to that. From struggle often comes gift. And you are an incredible testament to that reality. So I think just knowing your story and using it well to support people, that anything is possible, is very, very helpful, while at the same time making it clear we don't have the phrase that came to me, we don't have a crystal ball. Better to have the Kristen ball. You're perfectly perfect as you are, and you're perfectly capable of becoming more perfect. And that's what life is about. And it involves struggle and frustration and victory and overcoming challenge.
You know, Phil, I think one of the reasons I love the word evolve so much is that it's about letting go of the achievement, of the goal, of getting there. And evolving, it means growing, right? So with that comes the ability to embrace the imperfect. And I think that, you know, as a clinician, the more we can model how imperfect we are, the more the family and the client feels that they can be who they are. You know, the most wonderful thing any parent can say to a child when they're stuttering or not stuttering is, I'm so glad you told me that. I'm so glad you finished that. And to tell young children that the rule is you have to keep on talking is a wonderful thing. And they just look at you and they get that somehow. They get that.
Well, you really clarified and reaffirmed that in my career and in my life, that helping to make sure parents don't forget. And there's an interesting paradox there, because the more you feel free to express yourself, the more you speak, and the more you speak with passion and freedom and automaticity and spontaneity and passion, so you'll stutter more. Stuttering is increased with passion and speed and complexity. And so it might
or you might stutter less.
Thank you.
Who knows?
But I think it'd be easy to evaluate, I don't think I'm getting the right wording here, but to misinterpret. When a child really feels that freedom, you may see more stuttering. I mean, the worst case of stuttering looks like this. And so if you're free to speak, and if we allow that and we encourage that, you're going to see more of this thing, this other business. And it could be a sign of tremendous growth.
It's not by chance that there's more people tuning in right now live from around the world than any other conversation we've had. So if you're watching this, you're in the presence of greatness with Kristin Chmela and Dr. Phil Schneider. Your comments, your shares will help this, spread, and this conversation continues. I think the point that my father just made, the most severe speech impediment is silence. Child whose words are kept inside, or doesn't raise the hand to answer the question, to ask the question, to ask that other person out on a date, or waits to get married because they don't think they're ready to say their vows. The holding back is something we need to consider. So to the way I frame what my father shared, and I think it's very much what Kristen was saying, is let's move away from a binary way of counting beans of stuttered moments and working on fluency and then thinking about, oh, fixing, not fixing. We want people to evolve to be their greatest self, to communicate, to feel connected inside and outside, and to each other and to others. And how do we measure that? How do we look at that? How we look at it and think about it will help parents intuitively do the right thing. If parents think their job is to spare stuttering, they're going to focus on that. They're going to focus on fluency. They're going to focus on extinguishing moments of stuttering. If therapists think their job is to create fluent speech, they're going to do all kinds of fakakta things that are super artificial, plastic, and rigid, and probably not that applicable in real life. But if we start thinking about this in the frame that Kristen was sharing, in the spirit of my father saying, you know, we start working on things that are not heebie-jeebie, touchy-feely. They're just holistic. So help young people evolve, unfold, in David Shapiro's words, and evolve, in Kristen's words, into becoming the greatest communicators that they can be. And kids who stutter and people who stutter can be above average communicators, and they can change the world. And Kristen is a testament of that. And I think as parents, as teachers, as adults, as aunts, uncles, whatever role we play, we can be the adult that plants that seed of hope, that puts that statement in front of a young person, that we believe in them, that we hold that flashlight for them until they can take it for themselves. And then the goal is they push us away. They take it because they've got it. They've got it, and it becomes their own torch for life to keep going forward because they know they can do it because someone told them they could do it before they knew they could do it. And then they've got it, and we are there to just give it a little bit of fuel when necessary. So we need to wrap here, but hopefully there's 1,000 comments. Kristen, you know how to check these things. I think this will be posted for replay. Hopefully we'll have a round 2, Kristen, maybe, possibly.
Love to. I would love to.
This was like total indulgent treat for me, and thank you both. Any closing words from you, Kristen, or from Deb?
Well, I do want to thank you, Phil, for coming on. You know, Dr. Phil was, I'm not even quite sure the first time we met, but I was very young. And I was telling Yuri that we would, when I would see you at a convention, we would sit down. Many times you invited me for the Friday night, I want to say Sabbath, but I might be saying that wrong. And you allowed me to come into your space and just experience that beautiful spiritual energy that you have. And I always felt myself. Do you have people cry on this Facebook thing? Because I, and then
everywhere.
Year would go by, and then we would meet again, and then we would have a conversation again. And you have been a major contributor in my life, and thank you.
Thank you. I had no idea. Thanks for sharing that. And I think that your tears, and I have my own, are part of your transparency as a very whole, feeling, emotional person. I think we all learn from that vulnerability to really allow ourselves to have all these feelings and let them be part of our lives and be part of the world. So it's very precious, and we've cried together before. Mm-hmm. And I value that and I treasure it. I had one thought to end with, or at least for my last comment, given the timing, that came to me as you were just both speaking. That's the difference between the word speak and the word communicate.
Yeah.
Speak is a physical act. It involves movement and sound.
Mm-hmm.
It can be measured, it can be recorded.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a tool, it's not the goal. The goal is not in the physical world. The goal is to feel close to each other and to use speech and language as a way to know each other beyond the shape of our nose and the color of our eyes, so we can really connect in this world and feel that we're not alone. And a person can fail to do this and have speech that has no interruptions in it. And a person can do it with a lot of interruptions in it. The goal of communicate is not determined by how many interruptions or whether you have that trait or not. And that's the goal, that we can feel connected to ourselves and connected to each other. And speaking and listening, the two sides of that equation, communicating, connecting, is what it's really all about. I look forward to talking more. I'll reach out.
Thank you guys both for your time and your openness. And this is what this is about. This started off as having conversations. Kristen and I would chat seldomly, but always very rich conversations in such regard for her and connection there. And then the thought was, there's so many people that would be enriched by being privy to these conversations and create a sort of bridge or ramp of access. That's the spirit of this. And we hope to keep going. We're going to take the break after this morning. In a few minutes, we'll be on with Dr. Gerald McGuire. Some neuroscience right there. As I'm emailing him to tell him we're a few minutes, he sent me a text message. He needs a few minutes. So the energy is aligned in the universe. But yeah, sharing this, check out on schneiderspeech.com/events. You'll see the schedule of upcoming conversations. There've already been a number of requests for people to come back a second time. And we have some meetups for people to actually have live interaction. Parent meetup on October 18th, a teen meetup. And then we're going to have an adult meetup for anyone over the age of 13. We're going to screen a virtual screening of the film Going with the Flow, The Guide to Transcending Stuttering, which is a sequel to the first film. All of those can be seen, for free on our website, schneiderspeech.com/movies. But the idea is building a world of connectivity and using our relationships to create more good and helping each other just achieve everything we want to achieve. So thank you both for taking the time.
Mary, I would love to have the opportunity to come back and talk more about early stuttering treatment. And I'd love to come back and talk more about Camp Shout Out and what we're seeing there with the children that we're so honored to be with summer after summer.
You tell me when, I'll make that date available immediately. So just send me an email and we're on. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I wish everyone a really great day.
Thank you.
Anyone that's listening, you can go on the Schneider Speech Facebook page. Of course, I'll share it with Kristen as well for the different platforms that she has. And all of these are available afterwards, as well as on our website on the blog page. We try to put together some notes and summary and the full video playback. So thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day. And thank you, Abba. And most importantly, Kristin Chmela, so precious. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.